Let's move on. We talked about the project context. Prince2 has been designed so it can work within any context, including the organizational and the commercial context, your delivery method, your sustainability requirements, as well as the scale of the project. So we talked about the organizational context. It does not make an assumption, and that's Prince2 now, that there is a specific type of organization, like we just said about some organizations prioritizing or focusing more on the breaking down risk metrics versus how you control quality and cost and all of that. So it does not require any specific organizational relationships. It will vary by organization. So whether you're working within manufacturing, retail, construction, in engineering, whichever aspect, it will the organizational context will vary to suit, or should be, if you should vary it or work with that context to suit your specific culture, your specific purchasing or procurement strategy, and the likes. And that leads me into commercial context. Some organizations would have entered into a specific commercial relationship. These specific relationships have to be followed. So you can't create your own specific relationships or create your own specific contractual agreements. You just have to follow through. One example will be when I was delivering part of the manufacturing vehicle I talked about within Jaguar Land Rover. We had specific relationships with clients, so you couldn't sort of use any of the other suppliers that were coming in newly. They had to go through a process in order to get them suppliers on board to deliver specific resources for the project. So the key thing is to understand the commercial context within your environment. Obviously, whether it's the organizational context or the commercial context, these are important. Again, tying down to your project environment. What is the delivery method that you're using? And we'll talk about that in a slide or two. Get this. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a slide or two. How do you deliver the project? Are you going to deliver it in a linear fashion? Are you going to use an incremental? I think it was Steve who said that he's doing one project, which is maybe not. Who said he's doing a project which is agile? Was it you, Steve? Yeah. So you're doing a project which is agile. So the delivery method would have to be determined. Again, sustainability, the favorite word. And then it comes in again. You have to think around the sustainability of the project, what are the targets, and so on. Again, it will vary by organization. So within your organization, you might not worry so much about sustainability, or you might. Within another organization, they might not necessarily be the case. So these are all thinking about tailoring your project to suit the project environment. And then finally, scale. So different projects will have different sizes, complexities, and scale, and overall the scale. So how do you deliver big projects, complex projects versus small projects, less complex projects? You can't have the same level of documentation, right? You can't write a 3-pager risk RAID log or risk management plan or whatever it is, and then do the same thing for a very minute project. It will be an overkill. So at what point do you draw the line between this works for a small project and that works for a big project? And so you have to consider scale as one of the factors that will determine how your project context, what things you consider when building or trying to understand the project environment you're dealing with at that time. I know within yourselves, you most likely do very similar projects. So you sort of might have one project environment. So you probably have processes and all of that. You already have suppliers who maybe there's process to deliver them. Your projects might be the same in some cases. It might all be medium or be large or small. Somebody talked about 10 years and all of that. In some people's cases, they might have varied projects. Some might be large, some might be medium, some might be small. And all of them might have different sustainability requirements. All of them might require different delivery method. I think, like Steve was saying, some might be linear, some might be otherwise.
And where do things like, for example, I mean, we predominantly follow a large number of standards, particularly standards developed for the space industry. So would they come into the organizational context?
It sounds more like delivery method if you're saying standards from a perspective of, when you say standards, I'm guessing you mean processes that are predefined by maybe yeah. So
For example,
that could be inculcated within the delivery method. But yes, it sounds like also like organizational context. It obviously has to do with the specifics, but it sounds like the organizational context, because within your industry, for example, you guys might be using ISO standards 22200 or whatever it is. That is tailored to your environment, to your organizational context. And so, yes, that could potentially
they're
be.
both project management standards plus you know, technical standards.
Yeah. So that could be it could be organizational context, but at the same time, why I call delivery method as well is that if it's project management standards, it might be that your approach or your strategy within your organization is to always use a hybrid approach. And I've seen organizations like that in the public sector. It's a lot of linear approach. Even when things shouldn't be linear, they still tend to try and infuse some level of making it majority of it linear because they have a lot of governance, and then they introduce a bit of agility into it, which makes it a hybrid approach. So that would be more of delivery method. Whereas if you're referring to standards with things more like that relate specifically to your organization, for example, like say the ISO standards and all of that, and are not necessarily related to delivery method, I would say yes, organizational context is a better explanation for that one.
Thanks.
No problem. So let's look at the user, supplier, and the business perspective, because these are form the relation. We understand these relationships, or these sort of different perspectives of people working within a specific project. We know that we have the user representation, the person who will specify the desired outputs. So who will be your user in your case of your projects?
Well,
Member
it depends.
states?
Yeah, there might be a member state.
Yeah.
For us, the technical might be a different department inside EUMETSAT.
Yeah, exactly. You've actually got multiples. I mean, products go to end users outside the organization, but there are people who have to operate the systems, for example.
Yeah.
So there are multiple users.
Yeah, so that's good. So they specify the desired outputs, you deliver them, they test them, and they accept them, right?
So this would be like the National Meteorological Services, what we call the NMS. So
okay,
these are the main users out of the global EUMETSAT project.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Do you have suppliers?
Yes.
Person who will provide the resources and expertise to deliver the products.
Multiple.
So you don't have in-house suppliers. Are they all, or is there a blend, or are they mainly external?
It's both, because there are, I mean, it's a matrix organization, so there are internal suppliers who, at least from your perspective, and even they may delegate to even further external suppliers. That depends, but all of them are possible.
Yeah. So yeah, they could be third party, they could be in-house. That's the suppliers are the ones who provide the resources which are used to deliver the project. Remember that I don't like using the word human resources because I think humans are humans, resources are resources, but that includes human beings as well. Sometimes they might need a specific human resource to provide expertise on your project as well. So not just resources or that sort of thing. And then within Prince2, it calls it the business. So in some cases, they use the word the customer. And they provide the mandate and they provide the structure for the project governance. So whoever is providing that mandate, in many cases, whoever is paying for the project, and whoever is providing the governance. Because remember that they are the ones who are keenly interested in governance, because they want to know that they're going to get value for money. They agree certain intermittent points where they agree to meet with you and make sure that they're reporting, providing the right reports, that you're delivering the project as they expect it to be, and so on. Nobody would just go to a builder. Well, some people might, but you most likely not go to a builder and pay them and then come back after 3 years. Like, how long will it take? 3 years, and I'll come back after 3 years. Most likely you're calling in to check, or you're going on site to check to see what is going on. And that is your own way of doing your governance. And you'd expect that the business, because obviously you're the business in that case, or the customer in that case, you'd expect that they would also expect that there is that structure. Structuring the context of the organization as well. We could have projects from a project perspective. We could have projects that are under programs or under a portfolio. We could have standalone projects. So, let's see. Yeah. So you could have projects under a portfolio, which leads to a program, which leads to a project, individual projects. You could have a program on its own with no portfolio. You could just have a standalone project, all part of the business. It all just depends on how the relevance of the project. When you see a project under a program, it is mainly because that project has a relationship with the entire program. So sometimes you might be delivering a construction building and the road leads to the construction building. You could have two separate projects, project C and D, that is part of the construction or the new construction project, which is broken down into the roads leading to that, as well as the actual building itself. And again, it could be part of a portfolio. So you could have multiple programs. Maybe you could have a program start somewhere there, another program start somewhere there. But again, it's about strategic alignment. You could have a new space satellite project. Project A is to deliver the ground station. Project B is to deliver the aircraft. Project C is to deliver launch the space satellite. And Project C could be part of another program, while A and B could be part of another program. Both of them could sit under a portfolio. And then,
just a question, Ty. What is the difference between a program and a portfolio? Maybe it's basic, but
Yeah, sure. So a portfolio will have a group of programs sit, at least minimum of 2 programs, which are sat within that portfolio. So I'll just use a random example. Say Man on the Moon 2024 could be a portfolio. Within that Man on the Moon, they could have the construction portfolio, or construction program, sorry. And then they could have, within that same portfolio, they could have the technical delivery program. So both of them sit under the Man on the Moon portfolio, because they are delivering the ultimate objective to the business, which is Man on the Moon. But these guys here are focused more on the technical aspect of things. Which equipment do we need to have? What softwares do we need to have? And so on. And another program could be construction. They have to build offices. They have to build ground stations. They have to go somewhere in Nevada, in the US, I think, Nevada, where they would put up all the construction work that would launch the space satellite, etc. So anything non-technical they deal with. Anything technical these guys deal with. And both of them sit under what's called Man on the Moon portfolio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And then, okay, mouse has moved away again. So let's look at delivery methods. We have 3 broken down in Prince2. Now, like I said in the beginning, there are all sorts of names. Prince2 prefers to keep it straightforward. So they have the linear approach, which we might be used to. We use it with construction of our houses. We initiate, we plan, we develop, we execute, we close. So it's very linear. Obviously, look for requirements. I'm sure many of you use a very linear approach, from what I'm hearing. You plan the project, so you get all your requirements, plan it, etc. You do the work. and then you execute, and then you close. But then you have the more agile approach. A lot of it is used in terms of technical coding and all of that, because it sort of fits quite well within the project management side of things when you're using an iterative approach. Many times what you find is that you build, you obviously clarify that small piece of work that you want to do, you build it, you test it, and then you release it. So if you wanted a new functionality, for example, if Zoom was introducing new functionality, they would most likely use this approach. And to be fair, that's how they've built their application. Because when we started using Zoom, mostly around COVID, when COVID hit, they didn't have all the functionality they have today. Certainly when they started, they didn't have breakout rooms. And they had share screen and all of that, but they didn't have breakout rooms. So over time, what they've done is they've done the first iteration. People have said, oh, we need breakout rooms. They've gone there, they've defined it, built it, tested it, released it. And then people have also brought in more functionality as well. Now they're introducing AI, right? So into the whole call thing. So that's something they're working on at the moment to deliver. So it's sort of steps that occur iteratively throughout the project, and they are also referred to as the agile approach. Now, there's a lot more to agile than.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, we have we have a rather large formal development, and that is also incremental because the scope is very large. It's 1,600 requirements. So there is a stepwise incremental delivery of that, but it's not so frequent, maybe every half year or so, but and on each part there's an element of closure, there's an acceptance of each iteration.
Yes. And there are a lot of other factors around agile. Agile has become very researched, highly researched. I did part of it as my doctorate degree, so I've sort of seen all sorts of papers around it. So it's a very huge topic on its own.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a huge topic on its own. Prince just chose to keep it simple in terms of the delivery methods. So the incremental and the iterative approach. But then you could combine both. So you could have some level of governance. I know that the government likes this a lot because in some cases they want to still get the benefit of some level of agility on the project, but they still want their linear approach, which they're used to, have always been used to. So but it also applies where you're doing a project that you can't completely be rigid with this, and you can't completely be too flexible with this. So you have to introduce some level of flexibility or agility to allow you to deliver some aspects of the project using the iterative incremental approach, whilst still getting the benefits of what's called the traditional project management approach, or sometimes people call it waterfall, if you have heard that.
Yes, or V model, maybe typical for us is V model.
Yeah. So
iterations of the V model.
Yeah.
Well, where does execute fit into that? I mean, you could see it as using it, or could see it as something else. But what's its meaning here?
What does what? Sorry, did you say
execute?
Right. Yeah. So execute is doing the work itself. So I'll explain it again when we get into any of the planning modules. But execute here is pretty much. Are you saying in terms of the difference between this and this? Or are you just saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to. Okay, I could understand it as being usage of the system, but it may mean something entirely different.
Oh no, it's not even usage of the system though. It's let's use this as an example. Initiation is the part where you remember the example where we talked about somebody was doing some review, some slides back. So they find that there needs to be some changes. We agree that it's a project because now they've introduced changes. You then go into planning the project because you now have to say, okay, when are we going to do that? When are we going to deploy this? When are we going to change this? When we need to interrupt this team for like a week because we need to change the process, and then people can come back using the system, whatever it is. That's planning when you will do things, who will do it, etc. And then if it's a code, it's a better example with the code is that you develop the design, or you develop the initial things that need to get the code ready. Execution is the doing the work. So pretty much you're actually doing the actual work that needs to be done. Everything you've planned up to this point, you spend time actually delivering it. And then closing, obviously, is closing. It's the end of the whole process, agreeing that what you've delivered is all sorted out, everybody's communicated to, and the project is closed. So that is the executing is what you do within that process is what you do to monitor and deliver the project. So that is the time when you're getting, if you're in construction industry, for example, you're getting all of your construction site workers on site. They're working, they're actually painting the building, they're putting the tiles in. That is execution in the sense of what it means here. You are executing the work. Obviously, before doing that, you got the architect to put a structure. You got them to design, do the calculations, civil engineering calculations, and all of that. All of that was part of the design, part of the work you need to do to get you to the planning sort of lap.
So this
How
for
does
us,
it fit in?
yes.
Yeah,
This for us is IVMV. This is for us IVMV. This is phase D for us, I believe.
Okay.
According to Thai explanation, I think this is phase D, what we call phase D in our business.
Yeah, but also just to put a caveat though, even though I've mentioned these things, right? Prince2, these are not, we've not touched on Prince2 processes. This is explaining delivery methods, linear, iterative, and hybrid. So that's the key pick on these, because Prince2 has its own processes. So I don't want you to get confused with it. Prince2 has starting up a project process, that's what it's called, and it has all the way to closing a project process. This in specifically ignoring what is here in detail, you can understand what they mean by execute and all of that, because it's linear, it's iterative, etc. But Prince2 processes are 7 of them. Starting up a project process, and we'll go through them. Directing a project, controlling a stage, managing stage boundaries, managing product delivery, closing a project. Those are the right terminologies that describe what happens at each step. So don't get overly tied into the word execute or the word develop or the word close. I mean, closure is still the same word they use, but these are not the official Prince2 steps, if that makes sense.
And in fact, the diagrams are not consistent because, for instance, in the iterative and incremental, you have the definition in every iteration, and you don't have it on the first diagram or waterfall. So,
Yeah.
and what you were explaining before about execution and for me it is more like building. So I think we should not we can think on the general idea of that there are different approaches to deliver, but not to.
Don't get overly.
Can be improved.
Don't be hell bent on on what is said here. Within, like I said, Prince2 has its 7 processes. This is to tell you that within a typical waterfall project, now even if you Googled online, you will find that some people call this initiate, some people call this plan. I think within PMP they call it initiation, planning, monitoring and control, execution, monitoring and control, and closing a project. You can't find that here, right? So, but they use more of a linear approach. Within iterative and agile approach, I can tell you 4 or 5 different titles they call some of these things in there, but we're not teaching any of these things. These are just more or less delivery methods. Just understand the concept, straightforward.
Yeah, there's multiple delivery methods.
Exactly.
You need to understand, yeah.
Exactly. When we get to the processes for Prince2, we'll talk about what they call them within Prince2 in terms of processes from the starting to the ending of the project. That's the more important thing you need to know. Okay, so let's move forward.